Good evening, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here. I'm Amy Dacey. I'm the Executive Director of the Sine Institute of Policy and Politics here at American University. We are so excited that you are here and joining us for our discussion, Dialogue for Democracy. I will tell you, this event has been 5 years in the making. We've been every year trying to get this conversation together. I can't think of a more important year or time that it did come together. I don't know about you, but July has felt like a very long year. But so much is happening in the political environment. We thank those who have joined us in person, and we have so many joining us online. It is summer in DC. We've reached out, the communities that are joining us today, reached out to all their memberships, so we do have students coming in from different schools all over the country. We also have interested parties who want to see what Gen Z is going to do about bringing us together all over the country. So we welcome our virtual viewers as well. And we want to thank our co-sponsor for the event this evening, which is the American University School of Public Affairs. We appreciate them joining us in this conversation. I'd also like to acknowledge some special guests we have joining us here tonight. Personally, I'd just like to thank Jeff Sine, who, from a generous gift from him and his wife, Samira Sine, created the Sine Institute, and it's his passion and his interest in bringing and creating these dialogues that really brings us here together. He also has been on this journey with us for 5 years, encouraging us, ask again this year, ask again this year, we'll get this event done. So we are so grateful he is here with us tonight. I personally want to thank our provost, Vicki Wilkins, who is here this evening. She is, well, she's really the founder of Sine, who brought the program together, helped shepherd me in, and has been with us every step of the way, and she is phenomenal. And it's very exciting for me to announce our new president, President Alger, who is here. John Alger is the 16th president for our university and is joining us here this evening to hear from some about our Gen Zers about what's happening. It's not a mistake that our new president is so committed and is really a visionary in higher education, who comes to us from JMU, where he spent 12 years there as president. It's been exciting to meet you and bring you on board. But he's also a national leader in the field of civic engagement and higher education. So for him, this is also something he's passionate about and bringing to AU, and we are honored to have him here with us. I also want to thank our two amazing speakers, Courtney, Britt, and Carolyn, Salvador, Avila. They are really the ones who are taking the risk, coming together, having this conversation when so many factors out there tell them not to. And they said, no, I know we have things in common. I have personally enjoyed being on Zoom calls with them in these last several months. They went up to the Capitol Hill today and went to room, trying to get interns to come and join us, either virtually online as well together. They've done promotion together. They really are an incredible example of what is possible. At the Sine Institute, we create these convenings. We really, truly believe that if you bring people with different ideas together to just talk through, they don't have to agree on everything. But when we stop talking, we stop understanding. And that is when we are just in a bad position. And with this coming election, with everything that's at stake, we want to create those amazing conversations. And so we are glad to do that tonight. I would now like to introduce and welcome our distinguished panel. Could you please all give them a round of applause? Yes, you'll see blue and red, but there'll be so much purple by the end of the evening, I am sure. So first of all, we have our incredible moderator, Virginia Gunawan, who is a multimedia journalist at the Voice of America Indonesian, where she covers U.S. and global politics to millions of viewers in Indonesia through comprehensively produced stories and live reports. She is also in the forefront of reporting on disinformation and the impact of social media in developing countries. It is an honor having you lead us here in conversation, Virginia. We also have Carolyn Avila, who is currently a Bachelor's of Science candidate on the pre-law track at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. I'm sorry, but I narrowed your bio down because we just don't have time to tell you everything that you're doing, Carolyn, but it's incredible. She's also majoring in biology with a concentration in integrated physiology and minoring in both public policy at the Brookings Institution and psychology. She continually demonstrates this interest through her roles as president of the College Democrats of Nevada and as the national president of the College Democrats of America. She is also part of, she plays the violin, and she does so in front of dignitaries all over the world. Just a little interesting. I couldn't get her to bring the violin tonight, but we'll save that for another event. So thank you so much for joining us. She is joining us, came all the way from Nevada to be here with us tonight, so we thank you. Thank you. I also want to introduce Courtney Britt, who is the chairman of the College Republican National Committee, and she is the first woman to obtain the position by election. She earned her undergraduate degrees from John Tyler Community College and Virginia Commonwealth University, and a law degree from the University of Richmond. Throughout school, she worked on numerous campaigns for the Virginia Senate Republican Caucus and in the General Counsel's Office of the Republican Party of Virginia. Please welcome Courtney. And Courtney, I want to personally thank you because she has been with the organization for a while. We have been working on this together, and literally it's your work that brought this conversation to American University. It's your work that brought this conversation to the Sine Institute. So now I'd like to turn it over to you, Virginia, to lead us in conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Round of applause for Amy. Hello and welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. This is a very important discussion that we're about to have after 3 weeks of breaking news, weekends of breaking news. So I'm really, really excited to talk to you and find a common ground in American society, especially if we would talk about the young generation, which are going to, lead us in the near future. And as we see right now, before we get into the details of the questions and the issues and the policy, this is a question that I would like to ask everyone, like, how do you talk about politics? Because the way I talk about politics is that I have a weekly phone call with my dad for 2 hours, and we sum up like the politics that happens in Indonesia, in United States, all over the world, to see how different generation talks about politics, the way I think how the world should be, the way he revisit the way the world was, and to find that common ground between generation. I wonder, how do you talk about politics?
Well, Virginia, thank you for the question. I would say my experience is a little bit different. I am a first-generation born citizen here in the United States. My mom is from Chile, and it's been interesting kind of sharing my thoughts about politics in our country with her. She's got a completely different experience. She got here when she was 27 years old, so she's got a completely different life behind her. But the way in which we go about it, my brother and I, my baby brother, he turned 16 this year. We share our ideas about politics back and forth for hours and hours on end, and my mom usually jumps in and she'll ask us, "What does that mean?" And we'll share at least what we know about it. So.
And Courtney?
Yeah, I think similar to you, a lot of my early political conversations started with my dad. And for me, it was a lot of local politics, paying attention to what was going on at the county level, what was going on in our community. And that continues to this day, sometimes more spirited conversations than others. But that's where I first got my interest, and I still stand by the fact all politics is local.
Now that we have our way of communicating politics, and maybe it's not branded as politics, but I was wondering can you share why you think it is important to join together today to have this kind of conversation? Courtney first?
Sure. I think it's important because we're seeing a degrading ability to talk with people across the aisle. We're seeing our society become more partisan, more polarized, and it's great that more people are getting interested in politics, but we still need to do so in a productive manner. What is the point of politics if it's not to eventually get to governing? And the politicking has really bled into the governing to the point that we can't get stuff done. You see how roadblock things have gotten down the road here, and we've got to learn to talk with each other again.
I couldn't agree more with Courtney. I think the whole essence of this event is coming together from different sides of the aisle and showing that we may not agree on everything, but we can have respect for one another. We can have conversations in a civil manner, and hopefully at higher levels in government, we can eventually come to an accord, an agreement somewhere so that we can get things done.
Okay, now that we agree on each other, let's stir the pot. But so the first question is, let's start looking into different policy positions and see where there might be an agreement. Can you both share a little bit about college affordability and student loans? It is, I heard this is an important issue for the young people today. And what do you think, from your party perspective, should happen on this issue?
It's definitely a big issue for our generation. I would say, yes, maybe we have different ways of approaching it, but at the end of the day, our generation is being faced by a pretty heavy issue in this topic. I think it's no secret that college affordability is difficult because our students are signing up for student loans that they don't fully understand fresh out of college, 17, 18. I was 16 when I graduated high school, and I cannot imagine signing my life away financially the way that a lot of my peers have had to do. And then you end up making payments for something that in reality has this huge interest rate that's kind of hiding away the real loan. So you're barely making a dent in the thing that's supposed to give you an education, but at the end of the day, we're also seeing the value of that education kind of be skirted away, because I think the way in which our society used to function, people that had high school degrees and even associate degrees, and I think even now we're seeing people with bachelor's degrees struggle to find jobs with a good education. And then once they graduate, they've got this huge debt that they have to deal with, these student loans that they signed their lives away for, and they can't even find a job that's good enough to sustain that. So,
Courtney?
Yeah, I think we can all agree that student loans are a problem and the cost of higher education is a problem. It's hard to talk about that here in an institution of higher education, but it's true. I think that's the biggest thing that one of the biggest things that this generation can agree on is the crippling cost of college education now. And the student loans, like you said, this issue of signing on to them, I mean, I can speak to my own experience. Thankfully, I was able to make it through undergrad without student loans, but I wasn't able to do the same with law school. And I tried to find out, what will my end amount be? I went to the student loan office and I said, the financial office, and I said, like, what will be my total when I'm done with my 3 years? How much am I gonna owe? And they couldn't tell me. They couldn't tell me. And what are you going to do? Start your first year of law school and just like quit when it gets too expensive, when they jack up the rate the next year? Like, you can't do that. You can't stop halfway through. So it's outrageous to me that we have this system in which you start a program, and at most institutions, you don't know what your total amount will be when you're done. And that's just standard practice. How many other areas of our lives do we start the process, buy a house, and you're like, I don't know how much it'll actually cost. We might switch it up 15 years in. Like, we don't do that. So, of course, interest rates may fluctuate depending on what types of loans you have, but it's just a little silly to me that this is the system that we have, and we really need to evaluate it. But I do think that in addressing the cost of higher education, we have to do just that. We can't take a blanket approach of forgiving all the student loans and just throwing our hands up and being like, oh, we fixed it, because what about the next generation? What about everybody else behind them? Is that going to be the plan? That's not sustainable. We have to come up with a plan to make the cost of higher education more affordable for more people.
Now, in that sense, Courtney, I sense the frustration. I wonder, what would you tell our lawmakers if you could come up to them and tell them the exact frustration in terms of finding a sustainable solution when it comes to that?
I think there's a myriad of ways to address this, and back to all politics being local, a lot of this is actually a local issue because most students graduate from state universities, so they're state-funded universities, they're through state systems, and then of course our loan system is a federal system, so you have this patchwork of federal and state interplaying with one another. So for the state universities, in most states, my own home Commonwealth being from Virginia, the General Assembly is very involved in setting the rates of tuition. So they're just determining how much it should cost. They also set all sorts of things related to that. And the same is true in most other states through various systems. Federally, of course, we have the federal loan system that we really need to address. And I think one proposal that I've heard a lot of discussion about that should be more seriously considered is reducing that interest rate so that it's not so crippling.
Carolyn?
I couldn't agree more. The moment that you asked the question, my first ding, ding, ding in my head was reducing those interest rates, because it really is a crippling situation. And coming out of high school, when you're just starting out your life, you're thinking about, okay, I'm going to have to afford my house when I go to college. I'm going to have to afford food, transportation, maybe a little money to have a good time because it's college, and signing on to this contract where there's an interest rate that maybe you already don't understand entirely, but even more so, it's completely different than the interest rates that apply to other loans in your life. I think it's so important that we address that specifically first.
Okay. Now, moving forward, after college, people are start thinking about housing and thinking about the future of building a family, for instance, if it's something that interested in you. The Sine Institute conducted a poll last year and come up with, the survey come up with an agreement was on the issue of housing affordability, with 24% of those who surveyed include in the three most important issue that what will be impacting their vote in 2024. Now, what are your perspective on the importance of this issue, and what current leadership need to do to support the young people to find affordable housing? We see that a lot of the conversation in our generation has always been like, oh, we are the generation of renters. We could never buy a house, while our parents are telling us I had a house when I was 24. What do you think about it? How do you the way I address it to my dad? It's just it's a different time. How do you address it?
Well, this is something that I feel very strongly about. I would say it's absolutely a completely different generation. We're in a new environment. That's what we find ourselves in, because obviously this has been happening for a while. But I would say maybe around 2008, when we had that recession that kind of hit us all hard. I'm from Vegas. It hit us very hard. We saw a whole bunch of multinational conglomerates just kind of buying up houses everywhere. And then the next thing you know, they're trying to rent them out to people that are trying to start their lives, like myself and like so many other people in Gen Z. And we can't really afford that. And so now, rather than making payments for your first house, becoming a homeowner for the first time in your life, you're barely affording rent, barely affording student loans like we talked about, and trying to make ends meet with a small salary from a job that you could barely get.
I think, unfortunately, a lot of this has to do with inflation, too. We've seen inflation really skyrocket in the area of housing, and that's actually one of the areas of inflation that impacts college students and young adults more than others, because while college students may not be able to tell you what the cost of a carton of eggs or a gallon of milk is, because lives are just set up a little differently typically when you're in college, they're very in tune to the cost of rent and housing, because we are moving around so much more than our older counterparts. Typically speaking, we're also much more likely to be in a situation where we're renting, or where we really need to be renting. Is anyone in here who's interning on the Hill? Do we have any Hill turns in here? Maybe. If we did, or watching, those are folks who are only here for 3 months. They're not going to buy a house for 3 months, assuming they had the funds. So that is a situation in which you have to rent. So you're very aware of the cost of renting, and that continues to go up. Back in 2008. They're, understandably with the crash, they stopped building as many homes, and now we don't have the supply to keep up with the demand. And we need to find a way to address that issue, to increase supply so that it can be more affordable. I think that's one of the areas, back to local politics, a lot of zoning restrictions impact the way that we're able to build or not able to build. That's not to say we should throw out the whole book of zoning restrictions, but there are ways that we can address the cost of housing being too high without it bankrupting our country once again.
Personal question, do you plan to own a house in the near future?
I'd love to, but my student loans are worth more than my parents' first home. So okay. I don't see that. And to be fair, of course, a lot of inflation has happened since then, but I don't see how I would be able to buy a home anytime in the next 5 to 10 years. I don't know about you.
I would love to own a house. When I was a kid, I used to tell myself I'm going to own my first house by the time I'm 20 years old, 21, and I just turned 20 a week ago.
You have 5 more years.
Yeah. I have a little bit of time to make the goal, but we'll see what happens.
Okay, so that is a pressure on our generation as well, and there's a lot of pressure looking forward to a more optimistic future. One of them being the issue of environment. We talk about environment a lot, and we often hear leaders says that this is a young people's issue, and it's on our generation, the millennials and the Gen Zs, to find the solution for our environmental challenges. Now, for each of you, what do young people in your party value and think is the most important regarding the environment issue? I want to start with Carolyn first.
Yeah. First, I would just like to say, as a member of Gen Z, I don't think it just falls on us. I think it's so important to make sure that this is a group approach, that everybody's working together, because absolutely, we are the ones that tend to be caring about it a bit more right now. But at the same time, we are not necessarily the ones that made us get to the point that we're at right now. I think the environment has become such an issue more recently because of our actions in the past in this country and across the globe. But that being said, I think a huge part that our party specifically is very worried about is climate change. And I think specifically the younger group of students in that side of politics is worried is because we're going to have to deal with this eventually. We're already starting to see the effects of it, and I think as time goes on, our generation is going to be the one that sees the heavier effects that this has on our world.
I know climate change is something that we're really concerned about as well as Gen Z Republicans. I know that's maybe a shift from some older guard Republicans, but we're really worried about it as well. And I think for us, we're excited at the way free market solutions can address environmental problems. I think related to this is the issue of energy independence and security. As we're looking beyond our nation's borders and seeing turmoil overseas, it's important that we are energy independent. And I think that also helps play into our ability to care for the environment.
Now, do you think, is there any issue that the two parties can work together to find a solution, especially for the next generation, if, we always think about the future, right?
I would say absolutely. I think it's pretty telling to see that both of our parties, regardless of political affiliation, Gen Z as a whole is worried about what the environment is going to look like going forward. And so I think this is a great place where our parties can kind of come together as our generations begin to get more involved in politics to find solutions and to kind of get us out of the hole that we've dug ourselves into, I would say.
Yeah, I agree completely.
But in which particular issue do you think that is going to be like the most specific ones? Is there any in the top of your head right now?
I would say something that we can probably all agree on is that every American citizen should have the right to clean water, clean air, and being able to live on their land and feel safe with the resources that they have. And I think as long as we agree on that, which I believe that we do, finding solutions is going to be easier than ever going forward. I think once we start to see more Gen Z involvement in elected offices, that will probably be a topic that's tackled a little bit more heavily, because I think we tend to talk about it a lot in the politicking, as you said in the beginning, but then once you start governing, it kind of takes a backseat a little bit and it goes away. And
Courtney, your counter proposal?
No, not a counter proposal at all. No, I agree. I think that is exactly what we can agree on. We totally agree. We should be able to live in a clean, safe environment. Everyone in our generation, I believe, outside of our generation agrees with that. It's just to your point, we need to get more Gen Zers in office.
Okay. So interesting to see that shifted to the generation thing. It's not so much about the issue anymore, or yes, we talk about the issue, but then again, we see that the next generation sort of have the idea that you guys have to stick together to come up with a solution, and it's very optimistic. And I was wondering, do you feel like there's a exceptionalism in terms of the generation itself? Do you guys see yourself, I'm not saying better, but more have a better ideas in terms of finding the solution of what's next? Do you want to go first, Courtney? Or,
sure, yeah. I'll say I don't see our generation as being better than the prior generations. I see us as being different. Just as other generations came of age, as different life world events were happening than we did, it just informs our perspective on the world. And as the world continues to change, I think that our government needs to reflect that. We need to have a government that looks like the people. We're a government of the people, by the people, for the people, right? Okay, so it doesn't look like that right now. And I think it needs to look a little bit more like that so that everyone's interests are better represented. And there are some interests that are informed in different ways by what generation you come from and where you grew up, what time period you grew up, certainly where you grew up as well. And so having that representation at all levels of government, I think, will really be useful in helping move us towards some of those solutions. But to your point on exceptionalism, I mean, I think that, yes, of course we're exceptional, but I think every generation is exceptional in different ways. And I wouldn't get too hung up on one generation or another's specifics, years, birth years, as being better than the others.
Carolyn?
I couldn't agree more. I think there was something specific that you said, and I tried to latch onto it. It was that our lived experiences inform the way that we believe in certain things. And I think that speaks volumes because it starts to become less about the actual politics, whether we're on one side or the other, and it becomes more about us as a whole coming together and saying, okay, this is what we're dealing with together. We're all going to have to face the effects of the environment and the state that it's in right now. There are multiple other issues, I think, that kind of fall into that as well. But I think also just the fact that we've lived through so many things as a generation. I mean, there's a lot of them, and I'm sure we're going to get to them. Yeah. But at the end of the day, making sure that we come together and we stop looking at things so much as like, oh, but what side are you on? And instead of that, looking at it like we have to come together because we're all going to be dealing with the effects of these things eventually. I think that's the most important thing.
Now that we talk past the generation exceptionalism, I was wondering if, so moving on to the next questions, Britannica makes the following definition of American exceptionalism. It is the idea that the United States of America is a unique and even morally superior country for historical, ideological, and religious reasons. Now, is there a sentiment or belief in both parties that America is indeed exceptional? Carolyn?
I would say yes. I think when a lot of people look at the way that our political system is set up right now, they tend to believe that one party thinks we're exceptional more than the other. But I think that you can find American exceptionalism in the ideas of both sides. And I think that absolutely we have a lot to be proud of in this country. We've had a lot of important leaders in our history. We've had a lot of important movements, historical movements in our past. But I think also it's important to remember where we came from and the reason why that those movements had to happen in the first place, right? We had the civil rights movement, women's suffrage. We've fought for LGBTQIA plus rights. We've fought for so many different things, but we also have to remember that we fought for them because at some point in time in our history, they weren't there.
Yeah, I completely agree. Absolutely believe America is an exceptional country. And I love that that's something that we can unite around. And in saying it doesn't mean that we're flawless. We certainly still have things we can work on and work to improve, just as we have for our entire history. But that's one of the things that makes us exceptional, is that as a nation, we have a system in which we can do that. We have a system where we can change things. We can become more and more perfect. So I love that about our country and the way that we're structured, the way that we're founded, and the spirit of our people, that's something we can agree on. I think we can't lose sight of that. At the point that we lose sight of that, we, I think, begin to crumble as a nation.
But there are a lot of, right now, especially with globalism, it's easy to see what's going on in the United States and also to criticize United States in that sense. I would also agree with you that the check and balance system in the United States is amazing. It's something that I've never seen in any other democratic country. The check and balance system that hold each and every one accountable is something that we don't see in any other country. But when it comes to have the role in United States, role in the world, what do you think should be the role of United States in the world stage?
I think we are, in many ways, leaders on the world stage. I think to argue that would be a little foolish to suggest that we aren't leaders in the entire world, but especially within the free world. We set the stage for all other countries and have laid the groundwork that many other countries have come behind and followed. That's not to say that there's nothing we can ever learn from other countries or societies. we should look and see what works well other places, and is there anything that we can improve upon? I think we do that all the time.
I couldn't agree more. I think we have to take the opportunity to reflect on what's happening in other parts of the world to make sure that we're implementing things that help in our own society. But at the same time, I agree. America is absolutely a leader across the globe right now. And I think if we use that power for good, it's exactly what we should be doing. We should be innovating and pursuing technological advances to the best of our ability to make sure that everybody else in the world has access to that eventually as well.
Now, do you think, does it matter to the young members of your party how America is being perceived in the world?
Of course. I think it matters to everyone how America is perceived in the world. It is important that we remain leaders on the world stage. I think our leadership on the world stage has made the world a better place. And it's important that we remain that way. So I don't know that that's generationally specific. I think that matters to everyone.
I completely agree.
Now, but what do you want to see more of that will encourage for other countries to respect America in that sense?
I would say, at least from the students that I've spoken to in college Dems, we would love to see more communication from the United States to other countries across the world.
Courtney?
I think the same is true. I think maintaining lines of communication and continuing to demonstrate our influence in other countries is really important to college Republicans.
Okay. Well, moving on to the next questions, it's about immigration. Immigration is a complex issue that we are very focused on in this election and globally as well. Now, many bipartisan attempts have been made to make some changes to the current policies to address the concern. Is there one or more aspect of the issue that you've seen that both of you or both of the party can work together to find an agreement on this issue particularly?
I think the way in which our parties approach this issue is certainly different. That being said, I think what we can kind of take from that and agree on both sides is that there needs to be change. I think our country's come a long way in the past few years, in the past 50 years, in the past 100 years, and our systems need to kind of change to keep up with that, to continue to be efficient and as effective as possible for the people that we've got. It's like the first thing that comes to mind, because my family runs a small business, is if you've got a store in a small town and you're used to having 15 customers come in on a daily basis, and then the next thing you know, you've got a whole town that's coming into your store. You got to make sure that you're equipped to handle that amount of people.
Courtney?
I think we've already seen some areas of bipartisanship in immigration. It's so easy to focus on the areas where we disagree, but we saw that some of the policies instituted by the most immediate administration have been left in place by this administration and even defended by this administration. So I think there are some areas of agreement and very much understanding that there is truly a crisis happening because we haven't reformed and changed our systems to keep up with the times.
I wonder, how do you guys get your news or sources of news? Most of the time, if not right now, I'm watching a lot of social media. A lot. It's insane. How do you get your news in a comprehensive way in that sense?
I would say, at least my go-to, I use a lot of Instagram, a lot of Twitter to get my immediate news. I have my notifications on at all time. But then once I've got that first bite, if it's something that interests me, I'll go ahead and look it up, and obviously look for different sources as well, because it's super important to make sure that we're not getting half of the story, but that we're getting the whole picture. And so I might be from one side of the aisle, but I like to follow I guess both sides of the news aisle to make sure that I'm kind of finding a way to get the whole story, the whole picture.
Yeah, same with me. I try to follow both right of center, left of center news outlets to see how different sources are covering the same topic. And also, to your point, if something interesting comes up, looking more into it to figure out what's going on. I'm really grateful to be sort of in the DC orbit and be able to call people up and just ask directly what's going on, particularly when it pertains to our government. I can just get straight from the source what's going on, and I'm really grateful for that. I will say I'm personally not the prototypical example here. I am chronically offline, some have said. I see a couple people nodding in the back, and so I can't say that I get most of my news from social media because I'm not on social media nearly as much as maybe I should be, but a lot of people do, and so it is important that we're engaging with the right news sources and ourselves, like sharing good quality content.
Now that you mentioned that a lot of people do engage in social media, do you think social media has a bigger role in our generation, especially my generation? Probably not too much. Millennial, we're not a digital native people, so it's kind of slow for me. And but for the people who are native and digital, do you think the misinformation when it comes to certain news, a certain policy, or even a rumor that spread like wildfire on social media? It's so fast, it's so engaging. What do you think about social media and how they portray the parties in the sense of the policy itself?
It's not great. I think social media is tough. I think it's interesting, Gen Z, millennials, Gen X, boomers, to see the generational differences in the way that we consume and appreciate social media. I think one thing about Gen Z, like, we grew up with social media in a different way than other generations. It came on in their life. And so I actually think we sort of appreciate the hazards in a different way than the older generations do, because we've like lived it. And the older generations had an opportunity to live life without it and have had it come on in their life. We don't know a world without it. Even though I'm not a super online person, I'm not one to like be constantly online on X, and I don't have TikTok, and I am still impacted by everyone else, that being a part of the culture and everyone else being really online, and the way that shapes our conversations, our cultures, just the way we talk. I mean, think of all the words that we've picked up because they've basically become a part of the mainstream through TikTok and Instagram Reels. And so I think it's impacted us in a major way, even beyond politics. I think it's important that we do more research into it, figure out what is a healthy way to engage with it. We're starting to have those conversations, and I hope those conversations continue to advance in the next coming years.
I couldn't agree more. I'd say I will say, I get that maybe the millennials didn't necessarily grow up native to the technology, but from what I've noticed, at least, and the conversations that I have with my parents, technology still plays a huge part in the way in which they get their information. And that's so important to take a look at and kind of begin to understand more. I couldn't agree more with that fact, because I've certainly seen firsthand the information that sometimes my parents get on Facebook, Messenger, WhatsApp. WhatsApp is huge for my family because it's the only way to communicate to Chile. And sometimes they'll get videos that I'm like, no, Mom, here's the real video, or here's the one that wasn't cut right before the real thing actually happened. And I think it's important to make sure that we're double checking everything. But I agree, our generation is a little bit more, I guess, weary of whether or not things are truthful, and we always double check, because I think a huge portion of the people that I've had a chance to talk to do the same thing that we do, which is if it interests us, we take a further look. We don't just take it at face value.
How do you use your social media then? Do you promote yourself out there? Do you educate people in the sense like telling the public about the policy of in that sense?
I would say social media can kind of do a little bit of everything. I think we can absolutely use it to educate people. I certainly use it to send my mom the real video when it comes out. But I also, I think that we can use it for so many other different things. It's a way to be connected to the world in which we've never really been in the past. And I think the way that I understand it is because my mom used to explain that if she was going to go out to the park with her friends, they'd agree on a time, and if you didn't show up 30 minutes later, they'd leave you. And then then there was no way to know what to do after that. And the huge brick phones just kind of blow my mind as well, is what I'll throw out there. But realizing that now we're in a new age where we're completely always connected to the world, I do think that that has some ramifications as well that we have to look into, because I think having grown up in this generation, we also see the negative effects that that might have.
Yeah, absolutely. I think social media is great for entertainment, for education. I think in the education space, it is challenging because there can be misinformation. There can be even when unintentionally. I think there's plenty of unintentional misinformation in educational content, just non-political and political, where someone's giving their opinion and they say something, state it more as fact than as opinion, and suddenly it grows legs. And while in prior times, someone might just be having a chat with their friends, and this would be about as big of a room as you could get your words to spread. It just wouldn't go but so far. And now one offhand comment can really go far. So I think it's important when we're engaging with content and sharing content, creating content, making sure we're really being careful with it so that we're being accurate.
Okay. Obviously, the two of you are very active in politics and try to understand the politics and try to converse about it as well. But I was wondering, are your friends also the same? Or how hard it is to sort of talk to them in that sense of politics, not just like the everyday questions, but...
I'd say because of how much a part of my life this has become, a huge group of my friends is just as in tune with politics as I am, and as my brother is, and now my mom. We've kind of all absorbed it. But I do also have a separate group of friends that I use to just kind of distract myself. But it's also an opportunity for me to remind them of things that maybe they haven't seen yet, or that they aren't aware of. And so I do take that opportunity still to kind of bring politics to the table and let them know what's going on.
Yeah, I've been known to drive people to the registrar's office to register to vote from parties. It's happened a time or two. So I can definitely bring politics into the conversation. But I definitely have friends that are very apolitical, that are just really not interested. And I recognize that we are like the anomalies. Like, we might be normal in DC, but we're kind of the anomalies outside of DC. Everybody else is not as like ate up with politics. And that's probably for the best. It's probably a good thing that not everybody is consumed with this all the time. So I think, like, for me personally, my friend groups kind of span the gamut, both interest in politics and political ideology and affiliation, really kind of a lot of diversity for me.
But that brings me to the next question, which is, there's a collection of data that says young people do not trust the government or institutions in the US. With Sine's 2022 polling shows that 35% do not trust the Congress and instead value teachers, leaders in their community. So given the mistrust, why is it important to both parties that young people participate in this process, including voting or running for the public office? Courtney, do you want to go or...
Sure. I think it's crucial that we're involved in the process. To your point, a lot of people are losing faith in our institutions, and it's something that concerns me greatly. If we can't have faith in our institutions, I think that is just the beginning of the demise of our country, frankly. We have to be brought around something. We have to have faith in something. And we can disagree on the margins, but we have to agree, at least in the institutions that undermine our nation. If we want to make changes, again, we can do that, but we have to have a shared understanding. And I do fear the way that is seeming to degrade. And it's really why I wanted to do this event, why we've worked together, and why we're trying to find other ways is to shore that up so that people can have more faith in our systems and our structures. I think that young people getting involved and seeing that it's possible and seeing their own agency in the process is so empowering. I know it has been for me. I'm sure it has been for you. And I've watched other friends that I've brought through the process and gotten involved, seeing like we really can make a difference. Just a quick anecdote, a few years back in Virginia, we had a state House of Delegates race that came to a tie. It was an even vote. They had to determine who would win by pulling a name out of a special bowl in little old film canisters. So that shows that every vote really matters. Like, there was never a moment where every vote mattered as much as in that moment for everyone that was involved in that process. And I know we've got a couple people in the room who were involved in that election, and it just really sticks with you in a different way. So again, getting people involved to see that, to see how much impact they can make. And let's say you're door knocking and that you knock 25 more doors. Like, what if one of those doors would have made the difference? So I think that getting involved helps you see that agency and helps you really believe in the process.
Absolutely. And I think that to go even further, I would say making sure that Gen Z doesn't feel discouraged when they're looking at possibly running for office is so important. I think that's one of the ways that we in College Dems have kind of taken it on ourselves to get more involved and get our friends more involved is we've seen a lot of younger people run to be delegates to the DNC. A lot of them. A huge portion of College Dems have decided to run to be delegates. And I think that's so important because first you're running to be a delegate and you're kind of learning what it's like to stand in front of your constituents and talk about why you think you should be chosen to have this role. But then next, at least from what they've told me they're interested in, they might be the next assemblywoman or a state senator, a congressman, you never know, and it just keeps going. And I think that's the best way to make sure that the people that are in office right now, our congressmen and women and our senators, have somebody to pass the torch to eventually, because eventually it's going to have to happen. It's not whether or not it will, but rather when it's going to happen. So making sure that we have people that are interested enough and educated enough to do that is important.
Now, you meeting your friends and, they know that you are politically active. What would be the resistance of them not to talk about, like, they do not want to talk about politics because they know this is going to be a heated debate, we're not going to be friends anymore, or is that the case?
I think that's a fear. I think that's a concern that people have. I sincerely cannot cite to a single instance where I've lost a friend. I think it's all in your approach. And that's exactly what we're doing here, is modeling the ability to have conversations and do so respectfully and graciously. I feel like we're coming to a point in our country where we're often seeing our political opponents as our enemies. And our political opponents are just that. They're just our opponents. They are not our enemies. Our enemies are somewhere overseas rooting for our demise. But I know that at the end of the day, the Democrats are not rooting for the demise of our nation. They just have a different way of getting to, honestly, a lot of the same visions that I have. We want a lot of the same things. We simply disagree on how to get there. And keeping that part in mind is so crucial. And being gracious in conversations, just to hit a couple of practical points, I've found it's hard. Sometimes you see something online that's really triggering and you're like, I can't believe that, or someone says something to you. You can't believe that someone would think that. I can't believe that they would say that. That's just so repulsive. All of us have had a moment where we felt sort of triggered by that. I think it's important to stop for a second, take a breath, and say, okay, why are they saying this? Are they saying this because they're afraid of something that's changing? Are they afraid of something that might potentially change? Is there a misunderstanding here? And really looking to understand why they have the perspective that they have that's different from mine, I found has been really helpful. It's not to say that I always change my mind, but I think it's really helpful and it makes the conversations a lot more productive.
I couldn't agree more. When I first started to get involved in politics, the thing that I've kind of always kept with myself is to make sure I can have my own beliefs, but if I encounter somebody that maybe doesn't agree with mine, then I should probably start to look into exactly why they believe what they believe. Why do they think what they think? And challenging myself to do that in every single instance where I've come across somebody that doesn't agree with me has only made these conversations easier. So I can't say either that I've lost any friends, even if we disagreed. But I'm hoping that after this event, maybe more people will be willing to have these conversations and in a gracious and a respectful manner to show that we can eventually come to an agreement on things.
I have a couple of pre-submitted questions, but I already incorporated some of them into the questions that we've discussed. And closing to the end of this event, but I was wondering, what makes you a Republican and what makes you a Democrat? You want to go first, Carolyn or Courtney? Okay,
Yeah.
Carolyn first.
I would say, first, to preface this, I would agree that our parties don't necessarily disagree on where we want to land, but more so how we're going to get there, the path that we get there. And I would say that that's the reason why I'm a Democrat, is because I am in line with the path that they necessarily believe we should take most of the time. I will say I vote people, not party, all the time. Obviously, I voted in one election before this, but my belief is people, not party. That being said, one of the main issues for me is gun violence prevention, and I think that's an issue that kind of affects our entire generation, but specifically just the way in which my party goes about it is something that's so important to me. I go to UNLV. Less than a year ago, my school was shut up. I was literally hiding with my friends, trying to make sure that nothing would happen, and he banged on our doors trying to get in. And then they took us out, and we saw the outcome of the neutralized threat. And so I think that's something that not just students, but everybody across the nation should not be necessarily having to deal with, having to live with, and keeping that in their minds at all times, especially when you're on a college campus. That's a huge one for me. I would say women's healthcare is also very huge for me, and the way in which my party goes about that is important to me, specifically because of certain things with myself and my mother. But going forward, I would say I would love to have more discussions like this, talking about how we can get to a mutual agreement on those issues. And I think Gen Z has a good way going forward to do that, because we've lived through so many similar things, and we might not agree on how to get there right now, but we could eventually, because we know what it feels like.
For me, being a Republican was because coming up in Virginia, we have the Republican Party of Virginia has its creed. So you hear the platform changes. Many of you probably very familiar with the RNC platform changes, and those happen every 4 years. But the Virginia Republican Creed is something that was established long ago, I'm not sure, well before I was involved, and has maintained the same. And it is a set of broad principles, which I should have it memorized word for word by now, since we say it at the beginning of every meeting. But the general principles of fiscal responsibility, individual responsibility, and international diplomacy. It just, to me, those are the core of what makes us such a great nation, and part of what makes us so exceptional. And to me, that's why I am a Republican, is all of those values that we have had in the creed for so many years, that we continue to find ways to fine tune, and different ways that we are going to actually live those out, but making sure we stay true to those. And for me, that's what is the most appealing, and why I'm a Republican. But I agree that I'm excited for us to continue having these conversations and working together and finding ways as a country with a two-party system. We've got to find ways to work together, and the parties have got to be broad enough to include everybody, so that everyone can be involved in the process. So I'm excited for the progress we've started by this conversation tonight.
I would love to end, although this has always been a very high note, and both of you are very, agree on each other, but I would like to end the event with a high note. What do you think should America be excited about the next generation when it comes to the politics?
Absolutely. I 100% believe in our generation's ability to push us forward, push us past this growth in political polarization that we've seen. And I'm excited to see how we go about doing that. Like I said, we may not agree on how to get there, but I think we're going to get there, and we're going to get there together.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think this is an incredibly exciting time to be in politics. There's so many things changing, so many opportunities, so many ways to get involved. And I think it's easier now than it's ever been. Sort of to cite some of these things, like social media and technology have made it easier to get involved than ever before. And the involvement is increasing, and the interest is increasing. So I think this is a really exciting moment. I hope that we can capitalize on it. I hope we can continue this.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for our panelists. Thank you very much for attending here. I'll give it back to Amy.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Virginia, too, for keeping the conversation going. I actually think that you are what makes America exceptional. And I am so excited that you joined us tonight. It was an incredible conversation. Did you enjoy what you heard? We're not done, because I like to give homework. That's what we do. Thank you so much for joining us. We say at the Sine Institute, it's even more important what we do when we leave this room than what we did today. Because, these events can be transactional, and that's not what we want at all. So here we want to talk a little bit about how do we take this discussion tonight and keep moving it forward. Why don't you all try to reach out to someone you might have a different opinion than yours and share your thoughts, share your ideas. Talk a little bit about what we did tonight. Another thing is create a small get-together to foster conversation and understanding. I've found it's always too good to do it a little around food, but I generally like to do things around food. So, but create these conversations. Maybe it's in your dorm room. Maybe it's when you go home to visit your family. Maybe it's in your workplace. It's okay to have these conversations and bring up ideas. Share your thoughts and the ideas of the day in a constructive and enlightening environment. Keep talking. Again, I really think it's when we stop communicating, we stop understanding. Yes, follow us on social media. We are going to bring you more opportunities to have these conversations. We're going to bring great speakers together from different opinions, different opposite sides of the aisle. We're going to have here at American University opportunities for students to engage in that. So I think that's really, really important. We're going to make sure this conversation is available to more people who couldn't make it here tonight or couldn't join us online. So we're going to do that as well. And we just have to keep convening, communicating, and collaborating. We'd also like you to join us for a little reception afterwards so that you can meet somebody else that you might want to ask the conversation with. We didn't have time to get through every question. You can certainly stay and ask our panelists some additional questions. But stay engaged, stay involved. There is just too much at stake. Thank you again for our co-sponsors. Thank you again for everybody who joined us. It was so good to see some familiar faces in the room, and for those who brought a new face as well, thank you. Hope you have an incredible evening, and please get engaged. If you have not registered to vote yet, if you're in the room or online, I encourage you to do that. If you have registered to vote, make a plan to vote. You got to be engaged. You got to use your voice. So thank you, everybody. We really appreciate you being here this evening.